Hi, guys. How's everybody doing? Really glad to be here. And how many of you are it's your first day of anything grad schoolish? You're just, well, congratulations. I thought you'd be at the beach or Disneyland, so I'm really glad to hear your deep commitment to the process. I'm a Biola grad too, and loved it and changed my life. And I have always felt equipped by this school. So you're in a good place. You're in a really good place. A burglar went to a home to burgle it. I don't know if that's a word, burgle. And he's in the house in the dark doing what burglars do. And he's walking around finding really cool stuff like silverware and electronics, and he's having a great time. It's 2 o'clock in the morning. And he's in the living room, and all of a sudden he sees or hears a sound. There's a voice behind him. And the voice says, Jesus is watching you. And then it starts stomping around on the... It's a burglar. And he turns around and he kind of shakes it off and he keeps working. Keeps stealing stuff. Here's the voice again. Jesus is watching you. So now he takes his light, turns it around, and it goes in the corner of the living room. And in the corner of the living room is a bird cage. And in the bird cage is a parrot. And the parrot's just sitting there on the perch. And he says to the parrot, "Did you say that?" And the parrot says, "Yeah." He says, "Are you Jesus?" The parrot says, "No. I'm Moses." So now the burglar is so messed up, and what is this about? And he kind of scratches his head and says, You're Moses. And the parrot says, "Yeah, Moses." He says, "I'm in the most dysfunctional house I've ever seen. What kind of crazy, psychotic, dysfunctional family would name their parrot Moses?" Parrot says, "I don't know. Probably the same family that would name their Rottweiler Jesus." Now, there's a moral to this. And the moral is, especially in leadership, sometimes you think you're getting Jesus and you're getting a Rottweiler, and sometimes you think you're getting a Rottweiler and you're getting Jesus, and you'd better know the difference between the two as you lead organizations. So when I was thinking about the best way to help sort of launch what you guys are doing, I'm so excited about what you're doing. We need really high-quality leaders out there and changing businesses and being entrepreneurial and working in the corporate world and working in churches. I thought it'd be best to give you my umbrella, a paradigm. And I'm going to give you the 5 essential elements that I believe that every leader needs. And as you go through these, what I want you to do, we have a handout there for you. If you're a left-brainer, you like handouts. Right now you're going, where is he? Oh my gosh, what part's he on? Oh my gosh, he's on part 3. Oh my gosh, the day's already over and I don't even know. If you're a left-brainer, are you a left-brainer?
No, I'm good.
You're good? Okay. If you're a right-brainer, you don't even care that there's an outline. You don't even care, you don't even know there's an outline if you're a right-brainer. You're right now, as I'm talking, you're thinking, do unicorns really exist? Is he going to talk about that? Because that's what I need to know. So we'll handle you whether you're left brain or right brain or whatever. But I want to give you the 5 things that will help you. And the mentality I want you to keep in your mind is at least one of those 5 things is something you're probably challenged in. That you know that if you put some applications on these, you would do better. Because these 5 are pretty much universal in my experience and from what I believe the Bible teaches and what I believe the really good neurological and performance research says, that these are universal, and none of us is a rock star at all 5, but if you'll put some energy, because leadership's about focusing energy, right? If you'll put some energy into the one that kind of jumps out at you, things will really go well for you. All right, so let's go into it. The first one is the funnel. Now, letter A in the funnel. The funnel is my model of I'm going to give you, an MBA in 30 seconds. It saved you some tuition, didn't it? The funnel is the idea of where organizations are from really, really big to really, really little. I've never had so many distractions in 5 minutes. In 5 minutes of talking ever in my life. I've spoken 10,000 times. And right now I'm waiting for somebody to just stand up and start screaming or something. I mean, no, it's okay. You guys keep doing it. But the funnel is the way an organization works. And I'm going to go, a funnel has 7 aspects to it. And what you're going to find is probably one of them you really need to kind of think about. This is how organizations work. They start off with a big thing called a mission, right? Think about a funnel. The top is a mission. What's a mission? If you guys have studied anything here, you know what a mission statement is by now. What's a mission?
Why do we exist? Why does the organization
Why do we exist? Why does the organization exist? An organization exists for a purpose. It's trying to accomplish a purpose. It's got a bunch of people and a product or a service and resources, and they're here at part A, and they want to get to part Z somewhere and make the world a better place and be successful. That's your mission. If I went to every one of you guys' organizations' websites, there'd be a mission statement, the broadest category. And mission statements are very important because everything you do, every amount of energy you put in has got to relate to the mission. Otherwise, it's a waste of time or distraction. There's an old saying in the business world, the good is the enemy of the great. The good is the enemy of the great. And people that I know, they're very talented leaders, but they do a lot of good things, but they don't stop their energy and prune and only do the great things. They're not really successful because the mission drives everything. Sometimes you may have to say, we're going to sell a good company to put it all with the rest of the companies. Or core competencies. We're going to do our core competency. But mission has to drive everything. The second one is the vision. Now, anybody know, some of you more advanced students, what's the difference between the mission and the vision? There's a difference. They're kind of first cousins, but very important that you get them. We have a vision statement, for example. Huh? It's the how. The vision is a picture of the future. It's emotional. It drives people. And vision, you can kind of spit out the mission statement. We Acme paper clips. We want to have great paper clips. Didn't it just make you want to change your life right there? Vision statement makes you feel things. I was working with a company one time about vision, and it was a medical company in the Midwest. And they were kind of the urgent care, doc-in-the-box companies. And he said, the CEO said, I want you to kind of train our executives and get us excited. And I said, sure. I said, I need to get your vision statement. He said, my vision statement is great medical services on time. Whoa. And it was a worship experience for me. I started crying. I just started weeping. I'm just joking with you. So that's the worst vision statement I've ever heard. Great medical services on time. Whoa. That's awful. And I said, that's a really bad vision statement. He says, well, that's the best I got. I said, you'll never get anybody excited with an emotional picture. I said, tell me about yourself, because vision comes from a story. Always comes from a story. He said, well, I grew up as a missionary kid in the South Pacific. And my dad was a missionary, my mom was an RN, a nurse. And we grew up in one of those Stone Age islands, like where there's no electricity, and it was a great growing up experience, but I grew up in a whole different environment than here in the Midwest. He said, and Dad would go minister to the inhabitants and help them and that sort of thing, and Mom would help with the medical health issues. I said, well, was there a formative memory you have? Because I like memories. I think they really help us. He said, yeah, I got a memory. He says, I can remember being in the tree house that they lived in. The inhabitants, I'm not kidding you, they lived in tree houses because of the beast and the predators on the island. And it's like a movie. And he says, I'm 6 years old, and my mom is in a tree house with a native, and I'm there with her, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning. She's doing surgery. She's not a physician, but she's all they got. She's doing surgery. And he says, in one hand, I've got a flashlight. Guess why? So he can say, Mom, here and here. He said, in my other hand, I've got a walkie-talkie. And I said, what were you doing with a walkie-talkie? Who wants to guess? I'm talking to the mainland United States physician, I think in Oregon, who was saying, now what do you see? Oh, don't go there. Don't cut there. Now, Let me ask you a question. Did that just engage you a bit? I was so engaged. I said, what else happened? He said, well, it was a good life, and I saw Mom and Dad do a lot of good things, and then I grew up and they sent me to college, and I got my MBA, and then I started this company, and it's been a good medical services company. I've always wanted to help people because of that. Does that sound different, guys, between great medical services on time? Whoa. Do you see a little contrast here? I said, well, you've told your executive staff this. He goes, no, they wouldn't care. I said, this is the biggest waste of potential. It's like the best vision story I've ever heard in my life. So I got the team together because I was working with the leadership team. I said, we're going to work on vision statements. Sam, tell your story. He goes, they don't want to hear it. I said, tell the story. And he told them. Their mouths were open, like mine was. And I said, now, everybody's got a story. You guys get up and tell your stories. And one by one, they would get up. The CFO, the COO, the CMO, CTO, they'd get up. And one by one, they'd say, well, I'm here because we lived in Arizona, we didn't have any money, and my dad was really sick, and we didn't have air conditioning, and a doctor came over with some nurses, and they installed an air conditioner unit in our house and probably saved my dad's life. Somebody else said, I had a kid that was really sick, and they spent time, extra time. And by this time, we're all kind of weeping. And we forged the vision statement out of that. You must have the vision statement. The mission is who we are. The vision is an emotional picture of where we're going. Third part of the funnel has to do with your core values, because everything's driven by core values. And I always tell people, you know, a core value is something that you would take a bullet for. You know, if somebody asks you about your faith, deny your faith, we know we're supposed to take a bullet. And there are other things, from excellence, integrity, customer service, relationships, culture. Never more than 7. I've had some organization that had 20, and I don't know, my ADD takes over after about 7. I just start thinking about other stuff. No more than 7 things that you really value. There's your mission, there's your vision, there's your core values. And then there's your goals. Well, where do you want to be when you grow up? You know, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years. We want to be at certain metrics, whatever your KPIs are, EBITDA, profit margin, number of revenue numbers, et cetera, but there've got to be goals, because if there aren't goals, people don't have clarity. People have to have clarity to understand the goals. Fourth one is strategy, the strategic plan. Who can tell me what a strategic plan is? One of the things you'll learn here at Biola is the value of a strategic plan. Nothing happens without a strategic plan. What is it? It is a roadmap. It's how do I get from A to Z? What are iterative points? What are the inflection points? How do I know where they were there? It's a way to measure the growth, find the obstacles, and you can't grow without a strategic plan. And you'll get great strategic plan training here, and it's kind of like nothing happens without a strategic plan. The next one, the 6th one, is tactics. Tactics. Tactics are, if you're we got a game coming up Sunday. It's a pretty big game in a certain big sport. Anybody know what the game is? It's NASCAR, right? No. Now, in football, you've got the coach who has the strategy, but there's a guy who can call audibles. And what do we call that guy? Huh?
Quarterback.
We call him quarterback. He deflates the football first. No, I'm just joking. I shouldn't have said that. I should not. God forgive me for... And the quarterback is the guy that says, I know what the coach said to do, but I also know I'm here on the ground. I'm looking at the ground level, and I see some people moving around that the coach can't see. I can call an audible. And tactics are the audibles. They're the field decisions that are made that drive the strategy. You've got to have good tactics. You've got to have great ideas. And then the last one is vital behaviors. And the behaviors are, it'd be great to be in the 30,000-foot level all the time and to be pie in the sky and theoretical and all this, but somebody's got to behave. Somebody's got to pull a lever, somebody's got to make a phone call, somebody's got to do a spreadsheet, somebody's got to come up with a marketing plan. Behaviors. That's from the very granular level to the very, very big level. But you know what I found out? The 2 challenge areas as leaders that I work with companies on is that, number 1, they don't tie the vision into behavior. It's always kind of pie in the sky, very, 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 kind of idealistic. So make sure you're tying your vision into behaviors. What does it mean to be Acme Paperclips? What does it mean to be Smith, Pharmaceuticals? And how do we make this into behaviors? Make sure it's action-oriented. But the second big mistake I found is there's a confusion between strategy and tactics. The big difference is a tactic is just an idea. Well, we're going to have a barbecue this month. We're going to have Groupon this month. We're going to do a sale. We're going to double our calls or whatever. And people think that's the strategy. That's not. That's a tactic. And here's kind of like what the big takeaway was for me. No matter how great the tactic and the idea and how creative it is, if it doesn't serve the strategy, you got to drop it. The tactics must bend their knee to the strategy. And those of you who are highly creative and highly spontaneous, there got to be those times where we've got to restrict that and say, that's on the back burner because it doesn't serve the strategy. I've seen companies have to rebuild themselves over and over and over again because they kind of went with the flavor of the month. Here's an idea, here's an idea, here's an idea. And if you want to demoralize people and get them feeling crazy, give them a bunch of tactics and don't tie it in the strategy. So the funnel is kind of the big picture. By the way, they've told me we've got a few minutes for questions at the end of this. So if you've got funnel questions, it's kind of really what the whole picture is about. The second level, or the second ability, is technical competency. And what I mean by technical competency is that leaders need to know something. Anybody ever read Malcolm Gladwell's book, Outliers? He talks about some hours in that book. What does he say? You got to have your 10,000 hours of doing some things well. Kind of like what the Bible says when it says the labor is worthy of his hire. When the Bible says, be like the ant, you sluggard. You know, God works on our self-esteem because of sluggards. And how the ant stores and she reaps and she does her own job without getting monitored. You got to have 10,000 hours. It means you got to be really good at something. So know your craft. In other words, you've got to have leadership skills, but you got to have skills too. Some of you are really good at analytics. Or some of you are really good at IT, or at sales, or relationships, or marketing, or execution. Be an expert. I was speaking somewhere once, and a guy came up. It was a big audience, a couple thousand people. A guy comes up at the end of it, and he says, hey, I appreciate what you said. And I said, thank you very much. He said, I want to do what you do. I said, well, that's cool, thank you. I said, well, what is it you want to do? He says, I want to speak to large audiences and inspire them. I said, well, that's great. It's a fun life. What content area? He goes, I don't know. That's my first warning. I said, what I mean is, what are you going to talk about? He says, I don't know. I just want to speak to large audiences and inspire them. Now I'm getting really confused. And I said, let me understand this. I said, people like to come here, people who know something. Is it going to be astrophysics or plumbing or theology or? He goes, I don't care. I want to speak to large audiences and inspire them. I said, okay, how can I help this guy? I got 3 minutes. This is probably a God moment. The window's going to close, and he'll go off, and he'll be screwed up the rest of his life. So I got 3 minutes to fix this. And I said, can I just sort of mentor you? He said, oh, please mentor me, but help me to lead these big audiences that inspire people. I said, I'll mentor you right now. Whatever your name is, I'll mentor you. Learn something. He goes, what? I said, learn something. He goes, what do you mean? I said, everybody here had to pay something to come in. And I had to know some things. So you have to learn some things, whether it's astrophysics or theology or business or plumbing. And I could see his depression starting to set in. Like this wasn't fun anymore. No smoke and mirrors and running around with big, woofer bases and all that sort of thing. I said, let me tell you my story. I got a degree in theology, then I got a degree in psychology, and then I went into business for 10 years. And when I was learning all this stuff, I had to work in a psych hospital with crazy people. That was my laboratory rats, was crazy people. I was around crazy people all the time, and I was the slave of the nurses. And if you've ever worked in psych hospital, how many of you ever worked in psych hospitals? There's one who has, Lorene Abajian, who worked with me and Henry Cloud to start the Minute Meyer Clinic West longer ago than I will say. We started, it was you and me and Henry and our dogs. And the dogs. And when you're working in a psych hospital program, everybody's crazy because that's how they get in. You don't belong if you're not crazy. So by definition, everybody's crazy. And so I'm working for the nurses, and the nurses would say, well, go tackle that guy, he's running away. Oh, help us put pins in this one. This one thinks that they're Jesus and they're running around, acting like they're flying, help them. And I had to do that for years. And then they let me seek clients myself and try not to, do too much damage. And then I worked with that a few years, and then I began to direct things, and then I started writing books, and people started hearing about the books, and then people called and said, can you speak on that? It took about 15 or 20 years. By this time, the guy is thoroughly depressed. he left. I said, just good luck. Go find something, and I wish the best for you. Have a technical competency. I still haven't seen his infomercial. Still waiting. Learn something. Be good. Do your 10,000 hours. No shortcuts. Leadership is not about a microwave. Leadership is an oven. And the best leadership people I know are really, really good at something and always researching. The next one is what's called leadership competencies. There's technical competencies, which are the things I talked about earlier, math or analytics or relationships or execution or operation, innovation. Then there's leadership competencies. You know, in Psalm 139 it says that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, meaning that God made us very differently and very uniquely. And there is no one kind of leadership style. And the research just backs that up when you look at things like strength finders and DISC and so on and so forth. There's no one leader type. Everybody thinks it's always the person who's out there, you know, pumping their fists and yelling and screaming. And that's a certain type of leader. But have you ever read any literature about the introverted leader? There's some great research now on the introverted leader who is kind of behind the scenes and in a quieter way. There's a book called Quiet, where they are influencing people to transform companies and transform people, and they're not running around, you know, pumping their fist, but they're leading people. If you go to 1 Thessalonians 5, for example, Paul talks about the different ways we influence people, verses 13 and 14. He says, help the weak, encourage the faint-hearted, admonish the unruly, be patient with all. Not one size fits all, but you've got to find your leadership competency. One of the best ways I know to finding out your leadership competency is to get, well, two ways, is to get assessments. I really believe in the assessment world. How many of you have done strength finders? Okay? Now, you know in strength finders, the real money is not with the 34 strengths. If you go deeper in the strength finders, the real money is in the domains. Because the domains tell you that they've done, I don't know, maybe 500,000 of these by now, Gallup has. There are 4 clusters of the way those 34 strengths break down. And the domains are where I work with so many companies to help them see. The first domain is the domain of strategy and vision. Some people are really good in thinking in the future. Here's what we can be. You know, I think we've got it, what it takes. Like a Steve Jobs, they're disruptive. They can see the future that nobody else can see. The second domain is the domain of relationships. They're the kind of the includers. They make people feel safe. They bring people in. They welcome people. They're kind of they're the reason some people stick in an organization. You know, people don't leave organizations. You know that, don't they? They leave leaders. They don't quit businesses. They quit leaders. And so the relationship one is the one that hears well and understands people. And they lead because they sort of get inside people's heads. The third one, or the third kind, is the ones that are the influencers. They call it like woo and sales, and they're the ones that can set their hair on fire, get people excited, the cheerleaders, the salespeople, you know, the ones that kind of like get everybody moving, and they don't mind pushing people out of their comfort zone. They do it internally with their people. You got to do this, you got to try this, we're going to take the hill. Or they do it in the sales, externally too. They get people excited. It's just a gift mix. And the fourth one's execution. And execution is, I know about all the razzle-dazzle, but somebody's got to do the work here. You know, execution is the one that get no credit, but it doesn't happen if they're not there. They understand systems and monitoring and processes and accountability. They don't get a lot of credit sometimes, but nothing works without them. Know your competency. Get the assessments. And remember I said there was one thing to do? The second thing to do, though, is get feedback. As you're working, especially those of you who are here in the program, go to people like Daryl Passwater, who is a leader that I respect, and say, let's have lunch. Kind of tell me what you think of me. And he'll say, you seem to be good at this, but you seem to be challenged at this. Don't try to create a leadership competency that God didn't give you. Peter Drucker said a long time ago, put your time into strengths, not weaknesses. So find out what you're good at. Go to all the seminars, get all the mentoring, get all the coaching, read all the books on what you're good at. You might be the quiet one, you might be the extrovert, but find the competency. The next one is an open system stance. And what I mean by that is that the really most successful people I know, Fortune 100, great corporate leaders, this sort of thing, they're never satisfied living in their huddle. They're out there with people in different industries and different sectors learning stuff. They're cross-pollinators. They go play golf with people that have nothing to do with what they're doing because they always think, and how will that apply to me? The open system means they know that the principle of grow or die is the way organizations are. There's no such thing as stagnant. It's either grow or die. So they're always trying to figure out, what can I learn? They go out and meet with people in the acting world, or musicians or sculptors. They meet people in the math classes. But they're always saying, what is it you do? And then their mind goes, that's a different thing. I was working with a guy in Manhattan. Really good guy, but he was a huddle guy. So kind of like in our churches, how some people are kind of holy huddle people. Let's just go to church and just sing Kumbaya. And then lean over the church wall and say to the world, you guys got to become Christians. Anyway, Kumbaya, the huddle. And it's really kind of sort of enmeshed. And I said, you're just too much in your system. All he knew was the people in his field. He was in the health field. I said, you got to get out there. There's a lot of ways that you can learn things. And I kind of challenged him on that because he was sort of like afraid to go meet new people. Got a text from him 3 days later. And he said, I think I'm figuring out what you're saying. He said, I've got a really good friend who is a general manager of an NBA basketball team. And I always get really good seats. I've got another friend who's a billionaire who loves basketball and would do anything for it. I called my general manager friend and I said, would you give a couple of courtside tickets to my billionaire friend? And he was like a kid in a candy store, and he said yes. Then my friend goes, is that what you're talking about? I said yes, and really good things happened. They get out there, they're meeting new people, they're challenged, but they just don't stay in the kind of safe zone. Then, your character. Now, this character is sort of what my specialty is, because if you've got a system problem or if you've got a money problem, you'll fix it with character. You'll do the right things, you'll do hard things, you'll cut down things. If you're okay in your systems and your money, but the character's not right, really nothing happens. Let me define character. This is the definition Henry Cloud and I came up with 1 million years ago and wrote 27 books about this. Character is that set of abilities required to meet the demands of reality. It's that set of abilities required to meet the demands of reality. We think of a person with character and we think, oh yeah, they don't rob banks and they don't do drugs and they go to church and they pay their income taxes. That's an aspect of character, but character is much, much more than a moral system. It's much, much more than an ethical system. It's everything inside you. Have you ever known somebody who was moral and ethical, but they were a brain tumor to hang around? They didn't cheat, and they didn't steal, and they didn't rob banks, but they were just kind of jerks to be around. Anybody ever know anybody like that? If you didn't raise your hand, you were that person. You should have raised your hand. You've got to remember, raise your hand on these things because you're going to look. I've known a lot of people like that on a moral, ethical level, they were great. But I couldn't relate to them. And nobody could relate to them because character is much, much bigger than that. God made us with certain requirements to be able to connect, to be able to open up, to be able to be known, to take responsibility for our lives, to find our passions, our treasures, to deal with negative things and solve problems. But when the leader has character, the organization has character. The organization's character is no better than the leader's character. It's totally trickled down. I'll give you an example of this, and I'll give you a personal example. I come from a fairly large family. I've got 3 sisters, and we like each other and sort of like hanging out there. I come from the East Coast, so every year I fly the family out to the East Coast to visit and hang out and do the Christmas thing. And a couple of years ago, I was out there, and one of my nieces, Lindsay, by the way, I've got permission to tell this story, so I'm not gossiping here. She comes up and she says, I got to talk to you, Uncle John. And I said, sure, what's going on? She says, I'm not doing very well. I said, well, that's awful. Tell me what's going on. And she was 21 at the time. She was a senior in college. She says, well, I'm a communications major, and I've just seen reality. I don't have a job. She said, my boyfriend and I broke up, and I really miss him, and I'm kind of broken up about that. And she said, and I don't know what I feel about God anymore. I'm having that existential, who is God sort of thing we all went through. Did anybody have a struggle in their 20s? Okay, you raised more of you raised your hand then because you knew what I was going to say after that. That's good. I had a lot of struggles in my 20s. God got me through them, but she had the boyfriend problem, she had the can't find a job problem, and she had the wrestling with God problem. And I said, well, that's awful. I'm so sorry. And she said, well, that's not my problem. Okay. I said, well, what's the problem? She says, my problem's my mom, my sister. She said, you got to fix her. I said, I'm on vacation. I'm off the clock. She said, she kind of guiltified me. Well, you're my uncle. I said, okay, what's the matter with my sister, your mother, Susan? She said, well, every time I tell her about my God, boyfriend, job problem, she's not helpful. And I said, oh, she's a nice person. She says, hear me out. She said, whenever I tell her about the struggle, my mom says, Lindsay, listen to me. You're a Christian, and you're smart, and you're pretty. Feel good. Didn't you just start feeling good when I said that? Didn't you feel the angels singing when I said that? And I said, that's just so lame. She goes, yeah, it's lame. Fix her. And I said, she just said you're Christian, smart, and pretty, feel better? She goes, yeah, it just doesn't help me. I said, what do you do with that? She says, oh, I avoid her, which is how 20-year-old people have always dealt with their parents from time immemorial, probably Adam and Eve. Avoid your parents when you're 20 because they're crazy. And I said, well, what does your dad do, my brother-in-law? She says, oh, he's fine. We talk all the time. So fix her. I said, okay. So I find my sister. And you know how in family reunions you have these little sidebars? There's conversation in the backyard, conversation in the kitchen, conversation upstairs or whatever. I find her, and I said, let's do the sidebar. I think I take her to the backyard. Let's talk about Lindsay. She goes, oh my gosh, Lindsay. I said, well, what's going on? She says, you got to fix her. I'm on vacation. I said, what do I have to fix? She goes, oh, haven't you heard? She's not sure about God, and she and her boyfriend broke up, and she has a bad major. And I said, yeah, she told me she's really struggling. And I said, what do you want me to fix? She says, well, I'm trying to help her. I said, well, she tells me that you say you're Christian, smart, and pretty. She goes, I know. Fix her so you can take in the nuggets. The nuggets of maternal wisdom that will transform you forever. And I said, how's she doing? She says, well, she's ignoring me. She's avoiding me. So fix her so she appreciates what I'm trying to do. I said, and now I'm realizing the problem's worse than I thought. And I said, well, I don't think it's helpful. She goes, she needs these things. I said, and by the way, whenever you're working with people as a leader, when principles don't work, go to a story. What do you think Jesus did? I love you, come to me. Okay, I'll tell you about a plant, right? If you study neuroscience, the principles work so far, but you know what happens when you lecture to somebody too long? And they have studied this in spec scans. Guess what happens, those of you who have a lot of wisdom to give to people whether they like it or not? Because you're leaders. Guess what their brains do? We found out. Their brain goes to sleep while you're giving your nuggets of all the great things you know, parents and leaders. So while you're like telling them the 13th thing you need to know about life, they're nodding and saying thank you, but inside it's all, there's no heat. So I said, let me tell you a story, or a metaphor. I said, your daughter fell down a well, 40-foot well. The well of no boyfriend and no job and who's God? And she landed at the bottom of this well. And it was awful. And it was cold, and it was scary and confusing and dark. And she's all by herself. And she doesn't know who she is. I've been in that well. And it's an awful, awful place. And she can't get out. The Desert Fathers called it the dark night of the soul. Your people are at 40-foot wells. The people you want to lead and challenge and develop, they've been in 40-foot wells. And I said, you're at the top of the well, Susan, and you're leaning over and you're saying, in the bright sunshine with the clouds, you're Christian, everybody finish it, and you're smart and you're pretty. come on out, like Bob Barker, come on out. And she's just looking at you. She's just looking. She doesn't even have the ability to even engage with you. I said, let me make a contrast here. Your husband jumps in the well. Takes a swan dive, jumps in the well. And he lands there. I get a little emotional in this part, sorry. And he picks up his daughter. And he holds her. And he says, I've got you. I've got you. It's cold, and it's dark, and it's confusing, and it's scary, and I've got you. And you and I will come out when it's time to come out. But until then, I've got you. And that's why she listens to her husband, your husband, and that's why she doesn't listen to you. Have you ever had somebody jump in the well with you? I have. I've had people screaming at me at the top of the well, give me 13,000 Bible verses and told me why I ought to feel better. And I just avoid those people, quite honestly. And I'm a Bible guy. And I've had people jump in the well with me, and they're friends for life. My sister's no fool. And she said, you're telling me to jump in the well. I said, I am. You're a mom and you're a leader. Your leadership is your sphere of influence with your family. I am telling you to jump in the well and pick your daughter up right where she is and stop preaching at her and telling her to come out. You just go down. And I went into Hebrews chapter 4 where it says that we have a Savior who suffered in every way as we did, yet without what? Yet without sin. He identified with us. He came down to us and bled and died and sweated so that we would know somebody understands the well. And that is the mark of a really good leader. She goes, you don't understand. It's hard for me to do this. I want to encourage her. I want to challenge her. I want to give her the big picture. I want to tell her positive things. I said, I know how you're screwed up. I know who your parents are. But you're not going to have your daughter back unless you jump in the well. I said, Susan, encouragement and perspective and those nuggets, they're great, but you got them out of sequence. Good leaders put those nuggets in sequence by putting grace before truth. John chapter 1, grace and truth came through Jesus. In the Greek, the order is highly significant. It didn't say truth and grace came through Jesus. It said grace and truth. Because you can't metabolize the truth, you can't digest the truth, you can't get excited about the truth unless you've been graced. I can't hear somebody's words of wisdom until they're in the well with me. And I said, let me tell you the hardest thing, Susan. You haven't earned the right to give her your nuggets. And the only thing you can do is to jump in the well and feel the messiness and how hard it is to be where she is, and empathize and understand. And only when she says you get it, now you've earned the right to say, here's the solutions. The solutions are great, but don't get the sequence wrong. We have a culture of leadership that doesn't listen. I'm sorry, we do. I work with 1 million leaders, from high-end corporate to family-owned businesses. And we've got to put duct tape over our mouth sometimes and say, tell me more. That must be hard. Draw you out. One of my favorite passages when I teach in my leadership coaching program is Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. And it says this, it says, a person's heart are deep waters, the well, the deep waters of the well. The person's heart in the Hebrew, heart means the inner person. And it says a man of understanding or a person of understanding draws them out. Our job as leaders is to draw them out, not to take away their choices and freedom. We draw out who we are. We draw out their passion. We draw out their pain. We draw out their strength. We draw out their feelings. We're to draw them out, and then we earn the right to give them structure and information. One of my old preacher friends used to tell me, God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. The ratio is significant. I would like to challenge you. if you've ever had someone in the well with you, to learn to be that person. Before you give all the wisdom, jump in there. Listen. Must be hard. Tell me more. What was that like for you? I've been there. I can tell you what the research says about this because it backs up everything the Bible says. That if you understand them and then give them structure, they will walk over hot coals for you. They will work late at night. They will care about your mission. They'll worry about it. They'll come in early. They'll give their all because you got it. Now, it doesn't mean you don't give them structure and that you have a party all the time. It's not like that. They need the truth. They need the structure. They need the challenge. They need the clarity. But you'd better get it first. I am a different man because people in my life have done that for me. And it's kind of funny. So many people, when you really listen, they kind of know what the right thing to do is. You listen to them and then they pick up the phone and start making calls. They get back on the spreadsheet. They just needed somebody to understand. I was working with a CEO on this one time, and we were talking about listening skills because it's such a big part of character. And I said, how are you as a listener? And I knew the answer. It's kind of one of my consulting questions where it's really a trap. I said, he said, I'm a really good listener. I said, no, you're not. He goes, yes, I am. I said, you're really not. He said, yes, I am. I said, see? I said, let's see how good you are. And so I knew his company really well. We've been working together a long time. So I went around him on his Monday morning rounds. You know when you go around to everybody on the Monday morning to see how the weekend was and check on the people, and I kind of shadowed him. So he walked to the first person and said, how was your weekend? The guy went, it was all right. Great, good to hear, fantastic. Went by another gal, how's you doing? She goes, nah, it was okay. Fantastic, good to hear. I'm going, he's like the worst I've ever seen. So we sit down, and I just knew he was just checking off the I'm a listening leader thing. And I said, I think that might be the worst listening I've ever heard in my life. And he said, why? I said, because they were like struggling or whatever, but you just kind of did the cheerleader thing. And so I said, let me kind of show you what this is like. So a month later, I flew back in, and I did the walk around. And I said, let me kind of play you because we all know each other. And so I went up and said, how you doing? And the guy said, it was all right. And I said, no, that doesn't sound all right. He goes, no, it's okay. And I said, oh, really, it's not okay. He says, well, I lost $100,000 in the Smith account, and I lost the business money, and I'm just beating myself up. And I went, oh my gosh, that's awful, I'm sorry. And we took him in there, me and him and the CEO, to the office and did that 7-minute kind of help us, what can we do to resource you better and put you back together, and gave him that kind of 7-minute leadership counseling session you're supposed to give. And he was okay. And the next one, she had a problem. She had a sick kid. She said, my daughter's really sick, and we've been to 6 different doctors, and we're upside down, and we're scared. I said, gosh, let's talk about it. And we talked about insurance companies and ways we could help and that sort of thing. We finished up, and he goes, I said, what do you think? He says, I'm the worst listener in the world. And I said, that is the beginning of wisdom. And he's really good now. He's really good now. You can push them. You can structure them. You can give them clarity. You give them vision. You have to correct them, but you got to get them first. So, remember I said earlier about this, hopefully as you're listening, you're engaging, you're thinking, I'm pretty good at X, Y, or Z of these 5, but this one kind of challenges me. The reason for it is because God invented neurology. Isn't it interesting how the neurologists have discovered who God is? It was kind of the other way around. And what you'll find is your body, as you're reading this, I'm just kind of doing an in-the-moment thing right now. Your body's looking at this, and you're reading it, and one of them kind of stuck out at you. I call it the neurological highlighter. And probably one of those you went, that one. The funnel, okay. Technical competencies, yeah. The character piece and listening, yeah. But trust that God is working within your neurology to say, get to work on that. You're here to change the world and the kingdom to be successes. So find the area of challenge, and guys like these great teachers here and these faculty will help you with that. So, I want to have some time for some questions, and you guys can, then we'll go off and have something, Kool-Aid and Oreos or something. So let me tell you how we do questions and answers here. I know you don't all know whichever, and you all look kind of shame-based. I get that. So here's how we'll do it. When you raise your hand with a question, just say, I have a friend with a problem. And then I'll take good notes so I can take them home to my friend. And then your shame won't be triggered, and we'll have a great time. So, no, somebody told me you guys are very verbal and articulate, and so, quick question. Yes, sir?
I have a friend that has a confusion regarding strategy and tactics.
Okay.
Can you give us an example of what strategy and tactics, and how does that work?
Acme Paperclips wants to be, is right now at $40 million, and in 3 years wants to be at $105 million. And strategy is, what are the incremental 6-month, 1-year, 3-year, 5-year steps taken to allocate resources, to find new markets, to deal with the competition, to train the people, the human capital assets? Where do we put time and money and people and resources in the way to get there? The big path, as you said, is the path. A tactic is, let's do a big social media blast on why paper clips are cool. And everybody have different color paper clips, and they hire Pharrell Williams, and he sings Happy Paper Clips. I'm making this up as I go. And that's a great idea. And that's about a 30-day campaign. And then next month, let's do another tactic of, you know what we're doing? We're not resourcing our people enough. We're going to send our people to Orlando to paperclip heaven at Disneyland, and we're going to train our people for a week on what the paperclip's really about. And we're going to give our salespeople all this information. And the next month, we're going to do something where there's great markdowns. If you go to Costco and if you go to Kroger's, you can get paperclips for 50% off. I just gave you 3 tactics, but they've got to serve the strategy. Now, if you and I were engaging and I said to you, and here's another one that I'd really like to do. I'd like for us to start using pet rocks, because pet rocks is coming back. You know, it was 30 years old. It's about time for a comeback. It's kind of like the Beatles. And I want to put, $2 million in pet rocks. That's a tactic. Is that tactic serving the strategy? Don't get this wrong. No, it's just kind of this kooky idea. But people that aren't strategically related go, okay, we'll do that because it's very creative. But it didn't serve the strategy. The tactical idea, no matter how creative or how good it is on an ops level or a sales level or a marketing level, it's got to serve the path. Does that? Okay. Yes, sir.
What was the vision statement you came up with the pharmaceutical company?
The medical company I was working with?
Oh, yes.
It's really, really, really good. It was, it wasn't a me, it was a us, because you do things as a team. It ended up being something like, people deserve more than health. They deserve a person. Like there's a person behind the health, that we're a relational place, something like that. They just felt like the people part was so important. Yes, sir.
What was your personal journey like of having a personal John Townsend fund of 7 things that you're all about, your mission, vision, values, etc. And then thinking about your journey and as far as who you work for, how did you get those two to align? Because there's probably a lot of misfits or mismatches out there who are working for the wrong company who have a totally different funnel in their personal life. What was your journey like in matching up the two, like basically who you are and who you work for over time?
Let me make sure I understand it.
Yeah.
Like what was my personal funnel, and then how did I match it with the organizations I was with?
That's right. Yeah. I know now you work for yourself and spreading your ideas through books and speaking. So that's you don't necessarily work for someone else's organization, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of different. But
So how would one who is working on their own funnel find a good fit with an organization they're interested in being in? Is that?
through the lens of how it worked out for you.
Yeah. In my own journey, I didn't grow up till real late, honestly. People talk about knowing their mission at 23. Oh my gosh, I didn't know my name at 23. I mean, went to college and then went through seminary and thought I was going to be, I'd been accepted by Sudan Interior Mission, and then I found out that I really like relationships and inner workings. And then well, the best way to do that is to go spend 4 more years of your life in working a doctorate, and then to work 15 years in the corporate world. What really worked for me was probably 2 things. One is I have taken a lot of risks. I've been really bad at a lot of things. and that really served me well, because then you find out what not to do. There's an old saying that, in fact, it's not even an old saying, it's research now, that the biggest regrets in life for people are not what they did, but what they didn't do. People are sadder at the age of 70 and 80 about the thing they didn't do than the thing they did that were screw-ups. I screwed up a lot, and I just kind of jumped in, and I found out pretty quickly that I'm not good at certain things. So that was kind of a pruning factor for me. And the second one was, I think I've always been kind of a feedback junkie. I've always just said, go ahead and shred me. I don't need smoke and mirrors here. And people took me up on that. And I got really people that loved me and they were for me, but they weren't afraid to tell me the truth. And so that kind of it kind of pruned out the stuff that's not me, and to say, okay, here's who God made you. And then I did work for several organizations before I started my own company, and it came down to 2 things with me. What's their vision and mission? What are they about? Is it Acme paper clips? Is it a consulting service? Are they making a manufacturing item? What's that about? And the values of the people. I have found that if I've got a question between a great service and people I can't connect with, and people I can connect with, and a problematic service, the people will make the service better. But a perfect system, perfect ops, with people who are dysfunctional, silo thinkers, defensive, prima donnas, it's pretty much hopeless. And that's kind of always served me well. Yes, ma'am.
I'm just curious about when you're talking to people that have friends or family that are in the well and jump in with them, how do you know when it's time to, sometimes they want to stay there longer than...
Don't start getting your mail in the well here, so.
Right. So how do you know when you should start, trying to encourage up out of the well?
Let's assume they're an honest person. There are certain, in my world of psychology, there's a thing called a dependent personality disorder, and they're just looking for a well all day. In fact, their well is a stop down to a black hole. And so let's assume the person is, it's a good person, but they had a real loss or something like that. What you find out is that at some point, your support will trigger their aggression. God gave us a need for 2 things. One was support and love. The other is a place to be aggressive, like go out and win the world for Christ. Go out and make decisions. Go get busy. And healthy people, after they've received support, they'll kind of go, I'm ready. I want to go try some more things. And so you're the one that, when you see that moment that they start getting more energy and they feel more hope, then you say, let's get out of the well. Good leaders know that it's a tipping point, actually, where they can find that the people are feeling better, feel encouraged, metabolizing your hope, and then you can say, let me challenge you. That's what so much leadership is about, knowing when to comfort and when to challenge, knowing when to comfort and when to challenge. When they've received enough comfort, now it's time to say, I'm going to give you some goals, I'm going to push you, I'm going to stretch you. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
As a believer, business owner, leader.
I'm sorry?
As a believer, business owner, and a
Believer, business owner, leader, okay.
The character part, as far as dealing in corporate America,
Mm-hmm.
do you have an example of a big challenge where you were faced with having to deal with who you really were inside that you overcame?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the big examples.
Yeah, a story about me. Yeah, I have a friend. Yeah, sure. One of my businesses I had, I kind of wanted to run it by grace alone to see if that worked. And it didn't. Because I didn't want to be the legalistic black and white leader who's like pounding. So I was just kind of like, I trust you guys and get your job done, and no punching time cards and this sort of thing. I trust you. And it was a big mess because leaders have to provide structure. And I just thought everybody would just show up on time, but people were just having parties. So I finally came in and I realized we're not getting anything done. Everybody loves being here, but it's just a big birthday party. And so I said, okay, that party's over, so we're going to be very gracious and connected, but we're going to also have requirements. And, you know, most of the employees went, okay, party's over, we've got to get back to work. But a couple of people, one of them just, you ever had somebody in a systems world where they're the traffic jam in the system? They get the reports in a day late, they've always got things, they're all in a crisis, and everybody's sitting around twiddling their thumbs, and nothing gets done in the processes, the traffic jam. He was that traffic jam. Very creative guy, had marketing abilities, but just didn't care about time or his impact on other people. So I got him and his two buddies in the room, and I said, seriously, I was really serious about this, and I really need you guys to show up, be on time. I don't want to do HR stuff. I just want you get it. And his buddies were like, we get it. Can we go now? Can we go now? And he had this really defiant look in his eye like I was being unfair. And I remember thinking, I feel weird here. Something's wrong because, you know, he's got this kind of like, you're being unfair. It's just super defiant. I thought, well, maybe, who knows. So we go on, and about 3 weeks later, he's still the guy in the middle of systems. He's still the traffic jam. And I bring him and his henchmen in, and I said, this is kind of it. I said, I've really overdone the grace piece, and you're not listening, and we're going to go into bad stuff like HR demotions, even having to leave, blah, blah, blah. And I want to be very clear so there's no surprises, because as a good leader, when I deliver bad news, by the time you deliver bad news, it shouldn't be a surprise, right? If it's a surprise, you haven't led. And by this time, his buddies are like, we get it, can we leave now? And he still had that look, and I said, what's the look about? And he said, I've got a question for you. I said, sure. He says, where is the grace in that statement? And I remember thinking, this is a redemptive moment, I guess. And I probably got 10 seconds to do something good. And in California, homicide's illegal, so I can't do that. And I just kept thinking, kind of one of those mini prayer thinking things you do, and I finally said, okay, here's what I would say. The grace is that you are still sitting here having this conversation. And he looked at me, and I knew he still didn't get it. And within 6 weeks, like I like to tell my clients, he was making another organization successful, if you can read between the lines. Now, you asked me that, what did that show me about me? It showed me that I had an imbalance of grace and truth. I didn't want to be over-truthy, so I became very gracy. And the Bible teaches if you've got nothing but truth without grace, you've got judgment. And judgment kills people, and it condemns people. But if you've got nothing but grace without truth, you know what you get? You get license. And you get licentiousness. So every good leader is very strong on grace and very strong on truth, and I rebalanced, and that was my learning experience. So anyway, God bless you guys. Have a great year, and thanks for being here.
We hope you enjoyed this message. Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Learn more at biola.edu.